Mishmash! Kitbash Corner!
Hey, today we're going to be tackling the first episode of the Badab War series. Since I've been on a little bit of a break recently, I've decided to carve up the Badab War video into multiple episodes just to kind of milk the content a little bit. But if you haven't seen the big video, what you can expect from this series is I'm going to be going over each chapter within the Badab War and kitbashing/painting them. And for funsies, we'll yap a little bit about their lore. This first episode will be tackling the Astral Claws and their successor chapter, the Tiger Claws. But before we get into all that good stuff, make sure you leave a like, comment, and subscribe, share it with a friend, and if you really dig it, consider becoming a channel member. For just $3 a month, you get to see my videos early, and for $5, you get access to a weekly Q&A stream in which I'll showcase your models. You also get exclusive roles and channels within the Mishmash Discord, including a monthly meetup. Just want to say a huge thank you to my channel members. You guys are the lifeblood of the channel. But if you want to help me out further, as well as help yourself to amazing hobby products that I use here on the channel, you can use my affiliate links in the description to Wargames Atlantic, Illyri, and Golden Maple. And make sure to plug in my discount codes to save on some fantastic products. But enough of the yapping, I think it's about time we talk about the Astral Claws. There's no better place to start in this video than the poster boys of the Badab War itself, that being the Astral Claws. A name vilified within the Imperium and synonymous with now infamy and treachery, for more than 5,000 years the formerly loyalist chapter stood toe-to-toe with the finest of the Imperium's warriors. The Astral Claws would be charged with safeguarding the Imperium's vulnerable eastern borders near the Maelstrom Zone. Once, they were truly the bane of pirates, heretics, and Xenos alike. Under the command of Chapter Master Lufturon, they gained a reputation as one of the most effective guardians of the region. However, as time went on, Huron's ambition outgrew his mandate. The Maelstrom Guardians would be formed, under the leadership of Huron himself, bolstered by the united force of the Astral Claws, Mantis Warriors, Executioners, and the Lamenters. And technically the Tiger Claws. Speaking of which, he utilized the Tiger Claws to bolster the forces of the Astral Claws themselves, pushing them well beyond the Codex-compliant limit of a chapter of Astartes. This was after refusing to pay the tithes to the Administratum, which, I don't know. I mean, Space Marine chapters can kind of do whatever they want, so I guess he technically wasn't breaking the rules, but he was. I don't know, kind of based. However, after the Imperium had tried and failed to bring him to heel, Huron declared independence, styling himself the Tyrant of Badab. The Astral Claws were now stronger than ever, and though it is difficult to ascertain for certain how large the chapter's strength was overall, it is believed at the outset of major hostilities that the Astral Claws stood around 3,000 battle brothers. However, with the bolstered forces of the former Tiger Claws chapter, it is roughly around 5,000. That is a lot of Space Marines. However, even with this combined force of a severely overbloated chapter, alongside 3 others, the 10-year war of attrition, with constant opposing forces swapping in and out on chapters when need be, proved to be more than this bolstering force of Astartes could withstand. In the shadow of a ruined Badab, the splintered chapter would flee into the Maelstrom alongside a severely wounded Huron. There, they would cast off all loyalty to the Imperium and the Emperor. The Astral Claws would reform into several splintering warbands, but none would terrorize the galaxy more than the Red Corsairs. Undergoing his own transformation, the former chapter master would become Huron Blackheart, Scourge of the Galaxy. But enough about them. We'll get to that much later. The Astral Claws are definitely one of my favorite chapters in the series itself. Made entirely for the Badab War, this is the only chapter that is actually featured in this novel series that was not an original of the Rogue Trader Marines. Hell, even their successors, the Tiger Claws, were part of that lineup. And honestly, even though I love Blackheart's design, the original Huron design is pretty freaking sweet. I'm just a huge sucker for silver armor, and I really love the blue trim. Also, headcanon moment, I do firmly believe these guys are Ultramarine successors. They're good at everything, not great at anything, and look at those colors. I'm doing this deliberately to piss off everybody that still thinks that their Sons of Horus successors. I actually really don't care, I just think it'd be funny. When it comes down to it, however, much like the Badab War narrative itself, I find the Astral Claws to be severely underrated. In my opinion, they are one of the most well-written single chapters in 40k history, and it's why the Badab War is such a special piece of 40k lore to begin with. But now that I've talked to you a little bit about the Astral Claws, and given a light background on what you can expect, I think it's about time we finally get to Kitbashing one. Now to Kitbash the centerpiece chapter of the entire Badab War, I wanted to go with something very reminiscent of their original design, that being very Mark IV inspired power armor. To do this, I would end up actually having to carve off the torso of a Primaris Marine, and I would try to fit on a Mark IV power armor torso. This was a little difficult to say the least. It did end up getting a little too tall at first, and I would end up fitting on some Phobos arms to make things fit in terms of the actual size. What ultimately took place is I had to snip down the belt completely to fit on the torso, and I would fit on the arms and basic pauldrons, along with a Mark IV helmet. This is a very simplistic kitbash to say the least. I know it's not exactly what I would go for if I were going for a more heroic type character, but I wanted to go for something that represents the average Marine of each chapter. The power pack was kind of a short-sighted thing. I did end up giving him a Primaris power pack, though I honestly see this color scheme kind of fitting this design well. Speaking of which, to begin painting the model, I would begin dry brushing dark silver over black. This would give me a great start to the silver power armor that we know and love for the Astral Claws. After this was completely dried, I would do an even streakier dry brushing of Vallejo Metallic Silver. These two silvers combined are my absolute favorites, and they'll be making plenty of appearances with the other metallic chapters in this set. After doing so and giving a nice little shading in between the rivets of each portions of the power armor, this being a sepia color along with a black wash, I begin painting the blue of the left pauldron using Celestium Blue. Painting this over a silver finish alleviates the need for any sort of highlight. This gives a wonderfully velvety metallic look, and I really like how this turned out after 2 thin coats. Already this Marine is taking shape. Now for the trim of the pauldrons, I'll be using Retributor armor from Citadel. This color still stands up to this day, though my pot is actually kind of old, so maybe they changed it and it sucks now. Who knows? What I do know is after 2 thin coats, this almost perfectly represents exactly what I want out of the Astral Claws. But now to go back to the more boring bits, I'll be painting the chest rig using some black and highlight it with gray. Even though I've seen what it looks like, I can't imagine the Astral Claws in my head without a Mark IV rig. It just makes sense to me. Now to paint and shade the rest of the armor and just about everything on the model, I'll simply be using some Oblivion Black Wash. This will take a little bit of time to dry, but once it does, I'll be filling in the eye using a little bit of white, this being bold titanium white. At this point, I had adhered the decal, and this is when we fill in the eyes using a little bit of green glaze from 2 thin coats. After that's complete, we will be left with an iconic looking Astral Claw. Now I know it's not the most bombastic, and it certainly won't be considering the other chapters we'll get to eventually in the video, but I think this is a good start on exactly what I want to get out of these guys. I'm simply using Primaris for scale and adding everything I like about the older armor patterns to make them look like firstborns. Another detail I didn't really get to showcase at this model is I'll be painting each chapter's bolt gun casing in accordance with Imperial Armory. The Astral Claws have black bolt gun casings, nothing too interesting, but I'll get into more details as we go on through the video. For now, we can move on to the other secessionists. For the first of the bonus figures in this video, the Tiger Claws definitely deserve a spot. The Astral Claws were only really created for the Forge World version of the Badab War, the one that is now currently canon. However, the Tiger Claws, now being more or less a footnote and a significant accessory to the Astral Claws, were once the antagonists of the Rogue Trader series of the Badab War, However, the lore for this was very bare bones. In fact, even the Lamenters were actually part of the Loyalist chapters. Interestingly, the Tiger Claws were actually written out of the 40k narrative for the longest time up until the Forge World era of the Astral Claws in the Badab War series. Despite originally being at the forefront of the original Badab War series, there was nothing to really go off of. And despite being kinda downgraded, they definitely have way more lore this time around. For the longest time, the Tiger Claws were thought to be entirely lost, up until their re-emergence from the warp. They would do battle with some Eldar slavers, and eventually their de facto leader, Captain Vitala, would go missing, and the chapter itself would once again disappear into obscurity. This would play into their advantage, as the Tiger Claws were thought to be part of the Cursed Founding, leading to inquisitorial forces to just leave it be. Eventually, they would re-emerge into the forces of the Astral Claws, bolstering their numbers. During the Badab War itself, an apothecary of the Astral Claws, Isaria Seneca, would be interrogated by Loyalist forces. Under this interrogation, he would admit the long-lost Tiger Claws had secretly been taken in by their progenitors, the Astral Claws. He would also reveal that the Astral Claws were withholding their gene seed tithes with the initial intent of rebuilding the Tiger Claws as a full-fledged successor chapter back to its full strength. However, this would never come to fruition. By the end of the Badab War itself, the remnants of the Tiger Claws would become the Red Corsairs alongside the Astral Claws. However, that implies that there are any remaining Tiger Claws left by the end of the Badab War. All in all, I do feel very strongly that the Astral Claws definitely look more the part as the leader of the Maelstrom Warders, and it would be easy to say that the Tiger Claws got a little screwed over not being the full-fledged poster boys, but they play a pivotal role, and I think their lore is quite interesting. They're a chapter that has plenty of mystery, however there's enough juiciness to it that I actually have something to sink my teeth into, rather than simply just take a color scheme and homebrew my entire lore around it. Though they may have been downgraded to a plucky sidekick, I think the Tiger Claws implementation into the New Age Badab War is actually really clever writing. I mean, it'd just be a shame to not have them there to begin with. Plus, I gotta say, they're one of the few chapters that has a bangin' color scheme in both the Rogue Trader era and the modern era. And hopefully I've convinced some of you to maybe give them a try painting them. They're a cool chapter, and it'd be really awesome to see some proper love given to them. But now that we've given them a proper breakdown, let's get to actually kitbashing and painting one. Now, to kitbash the Tiger Claws, I actually ended up using a figure that I kitbashed almost 2 years ago. This being around the time of my first Primaris kitbashing video. I initially just started building figures using regular Mark VI Corvus arms onto old Primaris bodies, and the one I used for this figure was one from the Dark Imperium kit. No shade towards the Tiger Claws, but I decided to go very basic with this kitbash because I don't really see them as anything other than Mark VII Marines. I guess if I really let my imagination bloom with this figure, I could do something crazy, and maybe I will someday. But I felt like going simplistic with the Mark VII helm, some Corvus pauldrons, and a regular old power pack would be perfect for the figure itself. What's there not to like? I love basic tactical Marines. It's what got me into the setting to begin with. And the point of this video is not necessarily to make every single one of these guys look like a Sternguard veteran. I want each of them to have a nice little flair of each chapter. And for the Tiger Claws, their flair is simply having a cool color scheme in my opinion. Actually, 2 cool color schemes. Their original is also really awesome. But the faded orange look is definitely something we don't see too often. To actually paint the figure itself, I would prime him and then spray him down using a little bit of rubber black from Pruracryl. This is essentially a 1-to-1 with their original stone black color scheme. To paint the armor itself for the faded look, I would use my makeup sponge, and I would dabble onto the pauldrons and legs using a mixture of Japanese brown from AK Interactive and Gold Dust Woman from Bear Cavalry Paints. This is a tedious process, and these colors altogether can be relatively easy to clog up details, so going about it slowly and in thin coats is key. I'd also speckle on a final highlight of a little bit of Sahara yellow, just to create a nice chipped effect. However, to move on to the metallics for a little bit, I simply use some dark silver. For how unique their paint scheme is, it's really not that many paints that you're required to use, something I greatly appreciate. Once all the base colors are dry, I would go over the entirety using a very light wash of Oblivion Black Wash. What I mean by this is it is watered down significantly. However, we will be painting the entirety of the figure with this. As I progress as a painter in one way or another, I try to avoid doing more all-over washes, but I felt it was necessary for this figure. Plus, it's still fun to do. After our wash is dry, we will highlight over the black armor using a little bit of light gray mixed with the rubber black, and we'll highlight all of the orange elements using some Sahara yellow. I know they're not orange, I'm just used to reading what Lexiconum calls them. It's not orange at all. This is, well, it's kind of orange. Be that as it may, I want to really lightly apply these highlights, and though they do stand out significantly while wet, they do come out a little bit more faded, which is exactly what I want. We don't want to overdo it on the colors, as a big part of the scheme is the faded look on the armor itself. Now, once this is dry, we can then begin painting the eyes using a little bit of burnt red from AK Interactive. If you wish to, you can simply use the painted in white-eyed method with some glazes, which is something that I did with every single model in this video except for this guy for some reason. Not really sure why I did that. But I would fill this in using a little bit of orange red from Procryl to finish it off, and I was quite happy with it. Again, you don't really need to do this. It could be a lot more simplistic if you wish to. Beyond that, there's not really much else to do with the model itself. I'm quite happy with how he looks, and though he may be very basic, that's the charm of the Tiger Claws. A pivotal piece of the story of the Badab War, undeniably, but I wouldn't give you shit if you had no idea who these guys were prior to watching a video on the Badab War itself. They're more an accessory, hence why they are more or less a bonus figure in this overall video. But I love them, and I definitely want to revisit this scheme, but that'll be for another day. Sorry, when I mean this scheme, I mean the older scheme. Foreshadowing. Regardless, as a bonus figure, I'm quite happy with them. I'd definitely like to do something a little bit more complicated in the future with both of these chapters, as there is plenty of inspiration within the Imperial Armor books. But for the mainline series, I just wanted to tackle very basic tactical marines. Like I said with the Tiger Claws, I could definitely see myself doing a full-scale Rogue Trader video, which might be the next huge Space Marine project, but you can probably expect that for next year. But like always, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, share with a friend, and remember to mishmash, kitbash, and paint some fantastic miniatures. And you're gonna. I promise. See ya.